Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship. Timing can often be as critical as the business idea itself. Being able to accurately gauge market trends, assist in identifying the readiness of your product can be the determining factor between a success or failure.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. What about you, Professor Palin?
I'm doing real well. None of my computer system has crashed. You had some fun last week, I hear.
Oh, yeah. Big technology deployment that didn't go quite as we planned overnight. So I had to do a lot of scrambling the next day, that's for sure.
Oh, that's loads of fun. Ryan, today I wanted to speak about timing and market trends. That's an area that I personally struggle with, is timing the market. I always find it very difficult. It's almost like I have to spread pixie dust and hope for things to work out despite my plans.
Yeah, you need to brush up on your crystal ball skills.
Yeah, the magic 8-ball. I don't know if you're old enough to remember that.
Of course, yeah.
That would be a bad strategy for an entrepreneur, to use the magic 8-ball strategy.
Sometimes I feel like people are, though. That or rolling dice and giving some significance meaning.
Basically, timing, you're looking at, can you accurately gauge market trends and identify the readiness of your product or service? And it can be a big factor with success or failure. And when I say readiness of the product or service, I'm not necessarily talking about the actual product or service. I'm talking about the market's reception of it.
Right. You're not talking about your ability to deploy it. You're talking about other people's ability to use it and accept it and purchase it.
There are many factors influencing this. It really is a big determining factor for your market entry and product launch. I look at three basically that are big factors for me. One is economic cycles. The second is consumer trends. And then the last is technology advancements.
Those are a good way to break it down.
The economic cycles is predictable to a degree, not long-term, but you can fairly well determine whether you have 6 months, even to a year, what's happening, with some exceptions of crashes that have happened with the economy. Even so, if you're looking at the tea leaves, it's still predictable. But that's something you want to very much look at, is what's the economic cycle?
Right. I'd ask you what you think our economic cycle is right now, but the best people are trying to judge that at the moment.
For sure. It's interesting, and there's predictions on all areas, but it's not looking great.
That's right. I think that's unanimously what people are thinking at the moment.
Did you want to introduce our new co-host?
Yeah. My cat is trying to say hello to everybody at the moment. If you see me struggling to keep them out of the camera angle.
Oh, that's very funny. That's the world of virtual now. It's not unusual to see cats walking across keyboards.
That's exactly right. Or dogs barking in the background.
Yes, for sure. Also, consumer trends, because they can fluctuate and predicting trends can be difficult. But you want to be aware of what is happening from a consumer perspective and try to study that as much as possible, specifically your target audience.
That, and if it's a lasting trend, if it has staying power, because there are things that become trendy that might be a really great business opportunity for a limited period of time. And then there are new market trends that are distinctly changing the way we're participating in a market or developing its own market because of that trend.
Yes, definitely. And as they're shifting, you have to determine, do I want to shift with it or pivot into a different trend?
Right. That's exactly right. Especially if it's an emerging trend, it's going to change. Very rarely does a trend start off, and that's what defines the market. It's probably the first trend is the interest level. And as it matures, that trend is going to change as it adopts more people and more people have influence over what exactly is participating.
So basically, drive your business with your head up, not your head down.
How many times have you seen somebody that's too far into a niche market? They're too far into that thing that's becoming trendy, and they're not looking at the business opportunities or the economic environment around them, the things that are colliding together. They're just part of that trend.
Now, the third one I mentioned is ever changing also is tech advancements.
Big time. We live in the era of technology. Most of the trends we're talking about are technology trends at the moment.
Now, how do you keep up with the tech advancements?
I'm a reader. There's a bunch of very good publications out there that keep up to date on not only technology trends, but things like acquisitions, mergers, these large industry shifting moves that are going on. Reading a publication is about the only way you can do it right now because so much of it is going on really, really rapidly.
My strategy is to ask you.
Okay. More pressure.
I also do reading on the various tech trends, tech advancements, but also I do speak with people in the know in various fields and getting their opinions. Usually they're experts in specific areas of technology. And I find that very helpful also.
Yeah, your own industry experts. You've participated in entrepreneurship for long enough that you probably have an industry expert just about everywhere that you can go to and get a really good answer from.
Yeah, unfortunately, many of them are retired by now.
I bet they keep their knife sharp.
Yeah, they do. It's actually true. I could reach out to many people around the world and still garner information. A company that, in my opinion, was terrible at this and really suffered was Kodak. Their entry into the digital market was so delayed, they fell behind, and it totally changed their entire company.
Yeah, it made Kodak what it is today, which is a barely hanger-oner.
They just missed the timing dramatically, and it was a typical type of mentality is they didn't want to accept change. They didn't want to move away from their strength at that point in time to what obviously was moving in the future. And it was obvious to virtually everyone, I think, except for them.
I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for some of those internal conversations, because as you said, there's no way they weren't aware of it. So they had a reason. Whether they didn't believe in it or they wanted to maintain their foothold on what they thought would become a parallel technology, who knows? But it would have been a very interesting time to be a fly on the wall.
A company that has done it really well, especially initially, maybe not as much now, was Square. Square was one of the first, if not the first, to adapt mobile payments for small entrepreneurs.
Yeah, mobile POS systems.
The timing was really strong. I think other companies have overcome them by now, but initially they hit a sweet spot.
They were the first, I believe, first I was aware of instantly deployable POS system. So you could decide that you wanted to sell something from a business perspective and do it immediately. You just had to download the app and enter some tax details, and you could start collecting payments, even before you connected a bank account to it.
I remember the first time I saw it was, believe it or not, in a taxi that was pre-Uber. They said, swipe your credit card on this, and there's this little square attached to the gentleman's phone.
Wild.
Then I started seeing them in flea markets.
That's probably still where you see a lot of it.
So it was interesting, but it's a great example of timing.
And using the technology, which was one of the things you look for. They saw that mobile phones had enough bandwidth and processing to be able to collect those payments. They had an online server that it just had to connect to.
A couple of areas that I think someone listening to this and saying, well, as a startup entrepreneur or running an entrepreneurial venture, what am I looking for? I like to look at my market. Are they early adopters? Are they trendsetters? Are they late entrance strategies? Where does my target fit on how quickly I can deploy these things?
So who's actually going to do the buying and what type of person are they?
Yes. It always goes back to understanding your customers.
It does. And that customer conversation. So that feedback loop. How can you get it in the hands of someone that would be an early adopter to see if they like it, if there really is a fit, if you're on the right track?
How are those early adopters influencers, and how can they impact that, and how do they roll that forward?
Couldn't agree more.
Now, another area that I look at is analyzing market trends. We've spoken much about the analysis and the tools for analysis, but you have big data. You're looking at trends in AI, machine learning, trends today in Internet of Things, cloud computing, social media platforms. The list goes on and on and on.
I think every generation probably says this, but I feel like it's harder than ever to keep on top of them. There seems to be so many fields that are advancing so rapidly that it's really hard to stay up with the times.
Yeah, every time I turn around, there is something new.
Right. And again, I feel like every generation has probably felt that way, but it's overwhelming at the moment for sure. So if anyone listening is feeling like it's overwhelming, I've been doing this for a long time and I still feel that way.
Well, I can concur, and I've been doing it for longer.
Yeah, there we go.
Now, there are many challenges and risks associated with the timing and not understanding the market trends. Specifically, if you have intense competition, you have to stay on top of it continually, because if you don't, your competitors will. Also, with staying ahead of the curve with trends, you have to keep an eye on regulatory constraints. Right now, I think of AI, and there is virtually no regulatory constraints, but they're about to be.
You have to assume that it's coming down the pipeline, right?
Trying to predict that is difficult, but you do want to look at, it's not going to always be the Wild West. But I remember going back to when the internet first came about, it was the Wild West. And you start to see more regulatory issues going on. Social media was the same situation.
A very recent example is cryptocurrencies. It was a totally unregulated industry for a long time. Over the COVID-19 pandemic, cryptocurrencies became very trendy. And now there are regulations coming into the field. Is it a regulated industry? Well, that's up for debate, but it is a lot more regulated than it once was.
Especially on the technology front, there is so much data overload, which we referred to earlier. Sifting through that and finding the true trends and the nuggets of gold, if you will, that takes an awful lot of time and effort.
It does, especially if you're trying to become an expert, if you're trying to launch a business in that field, you really have to become an expert on it.
And with that, you have limited resources as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest limited resources, again, we've spoken about in the past, is probably the most precious resource is your time.
It is undeniably, I think, your most precious resource. You can always create more money. You can create more this and that, but you can't put more than 24 hours in a day.
I led my comments to saying sprinkle some pixie dust, and we were talking about the magic 8-ball. I still stay with that component because probably of all the episodes we've done, there's less direct suggestions and action-oriented issues in this particular episode. But because it's so fluent and so hard to predict, you basically want to stay on top of it as much as you possibly can and make your decisions, but keep an eye on the results of decisions and don't be afraid to pivot.
Yeah, it's the 10,000 foot flyover, I think. Oftentimes you can get so into a trend, you're sort of hyper-focused on it. It always seems like the biggest opportunity. But when you do the 10,000 foot flyover and really look at how the market is changing overall, how much is going to be carved out for this potential trend, because there is a limited number of people buying products, period. You kind of have to take it away from someone else. That's when you can really make good decisions.
Absolutely. Well, any final thoughts in conclusion?
Don't be afraid to read up and ask people questions. I find a lot when people are looking at these market trends, if they have an idea, they sort of guard that idea because they feel like it is a window of time, which it may very well be. So they don't want to share it with others to get feedback. In my experience, that's just limiting what you can do. If you're the one that's going to be the one making the effort, really on the front lines, pushing the business forwards, you shouldn't be afraid to talk about it because, as we know, the most difficult part about business is the execution component.
Speaking with people who know what they're talking about is always a good strategy. Today, you can do it virtually also. It doesn't have to always be face-to-face. So that expands your knowledge base exponentially.
Exactly.
Well, that sounds like a game plan. Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out ProfSpirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.